There's this unique kind of exhaustion that settles in when you realize you're fighting battles you shouldn't have to. It's the exhaustion of constantly setting boundaries, of protecting your peace, and of drawing lines that should have been obvious to everyone involved. That feeling, that heavy, weary sense of knowing you've done everything you can to protect what's yours, but still having to explain yourself? That's where I found myself. And honestly, finding that inner strength to finally say no more has been one of the most liberating, albeit challenging, things I've ever done. It really hit home recently, around my daughter Lily's 6th birthday. For context, my father, Mark, has been with Brenda for nearly 15 years now. She's his third wife, and bless her heart, she's always been incredibly insecure about her place in our family. It's led to a lot of dramatic moments over the years. Last year, for Lily's 5th birthday, David, my husband, and I threw her a Cinderella-themed party at our place in Arlington. Mark showed up alone, saying Brenda was sick. Didn't bother me much at the time, but I did have this weird feeling, like something was just off. Then, near the end of the party, just as the kids were digging into cake and some parents were packing up to leave, Brenda arrived. In a full-blown Cinderella costume. Waving, acting in character, trying to interact with the kids. David and I were completely blindsided. We hadn't been told anything, though I did remember her vaguely asking weeks prior if we were hiring performers. Turns out, she bought the costume the day she found out the theme. We're still convinced she did it for attention. It didn't really work, though. Lily, my daughter, recognized her immediately. But it still caused a bit of chaos, disrupting cake time with a dozen confused preschoolers. We managed to get things back on track, but it took effort. Despite that, Lily had a fantastic time, and that's what mattered. David and I later spoke to Brenda, asking her not to do it again. She agreed, even apologized. But I had a nagging suspicion she was just saying what we wanted to hear. That suspicion grew over the holidays. We spent a lot of time with Mark's side of the family, and Brenda kept bringing up the Cinderella party. Constantly. Reminiscing, showing pictures, talking about what she'd do differently next time. She didn't press my kids much, but she did ask Lily about her desired theme for this year and how she'd feel if a character showed up. I just knew she was planning something. This year, we were having the party at a venue in Fairfax, which meant strict time slots. No room for unannounced, costumed chaos. David and I tried to talk to Brenda again. She wouldn't admit she was planning anything, but she kept insisting that if she did show up in costume, the kids would love it, it would be fun. We tried to get her to promise she wouldn't, but she just dodged, claiming she didn't see the problem. Finally, we told her it would be best if she didn't come to the party at all. She could join us for the dinner afterwards, but not the main event. She got upset, and Mark got angry at us, calling us paranoid and dramatic. A part of me worried we were going too far, but deep down, I knew I was right. I just couldn't risk the party being ruined. And wouldn't you know it, I have this weird love-hate thing with being right. A couple of days later, Mark called me. He'd opened Brenda's mail by mistake and found a purple wig, styled suspiciously like one of those K-pop demon hunters. The costume was due to arrive in about a week. She hadn't planned on telling him about any of it. Mark said they'd fought, mostly because neither the wig nor the costume were cheap. But then he also launched into this whole spiel about how Brenda had been watching the movie repeatedly to study how much she cares for Lily, and wasn't it sweet how much she loved my kids, and maybe Lily would like it this time. That's all I heard before I went looking for a pillow to scream into. I was done. This made me so much angrier than it probably should have, but it wasn't the first time someone in my family had decided my plans, and the effort I put in just didn't matter. If I couldn't even plan my own child's birthday party without someone trying to butt in, then I had every right to draw a hard line. Brenda was officially banned from the party. David and I immediately alerted the venue that we hadn't hired any character performers, and if any Caucasian-looking K-pop star showed up, they were to tell her to go home. We even gave them her picture. They reassured us they wouldn't let anyone not on the guest list in any way, so that was a relief. I felt awful about making them deal with our family drama, but at least it was one less thing to worry about. Mark and I did fight about it, but I stood my ground. He kept arguing it wouldn't be a big deal if I just let Brenda have this. I told him that wasn't the point. If he wasn't the one who had to manage the situation, he didn't get to tell me how easy it would be. In the end, we compromised. Mark could come to the birthday party, but only if Brenda didn't tag along. If she did, they were both out. They could both still join us for dinner later. I started thinking about lowering contact with both of them, too. I love my dad, but no headache is worth this. I needed to calm down before figuring out the details, but just having this resolved lifted a huge weight. I had said I wouldn't update again unless something happened, and well, you can probably guess why I'm back. The party itself? It was perfect. Lily absolutely loved it. The kids had a blast, and we had zero issues with the venue. Brenda didn't try to come, and Mark didn't even try to convince me to re-invite her. I'd expected him to sulk, but he actually did pretty well. Then came the birthday dinner. Mark and Brenda were running so late that the food arrived at the same time they did. Brenda was in her K-pop demon hunter costume, wig, jacket, the whole 9 yards. Mark was staring at the table, refusing to make eye contact, clearly embarrassed. The kids saw them before we did. I'd considered the possibility she might do this at the restaurant, but my main worry had been the party itself. David and I had agreed not to make a scene in front of the kids, but to intervene if things got out of hand. It was incredibly awkward. The 5 kids, including my 3, mostly ignored her. They recognized Brenda, calling her by her name, which clearly bothered her. They also weren't amused by her constant attempts to get their attention, trying to make them interact while they were busy talking or eating. Finally, when she started trying to pull Lily's hand away from her food to get her to dance, I told Brenda to leave them alone. She sat there in silence for a few minutes before leaving for the bathroom. Then she texted Mark that she wasn't feeling well, and they left. They were there for less than 20 minutes. People were staring, but honestly, I stopped caring about that a long time ago. Aside from a few cringes, like when Brenda asked the waitress if they had ramen at Friendly's, nothing too chaotic happened. I still regret not just telling her to leave sooner. That night, David handled bedtime. Lily asked him if it was okay that she didn't like Brenda. She even asked him not to tell me at first because she didn't want to upset me. The 3 of us talked on Sunday. Lily basically said she was upset Brenda was bothering her and being pushy during dinner, and she was worried the kids at the next table were looking at her funny because of what was going on. That hit me hard. I'm exhausted, and it feels like this pattern repeats itself endlessly. It's always fine for them to do what they want, as long as I'm the one dealing with the consequences. More than anything, I refuse to let my children be treated this way. I genuinely don't understand why Brenda insists on behaving like this, but I shouldn't have to worry about whether a grown woman will listen when I tell her not to do something at my child's event. A few hours after talking with Lily, the kids went out with my mom, Diane. I used the opportunity to call Mark and Brenda and told them, clearly, that Brenda was no longer welcome at any of my children's events. We had an interesting argument. Brenda claimed I had humiliated her by telling her to leave Lily alone and couldn't understand why I was doing this when she was willing to go this far to make my kids happy. Mark and I talked again later that night, without her. He was still defending Brenda but admitted he was embarrassed by her costume. Apparently, that was why they were late to dinner. She'd put it on and refused to take it off, and they'd argued until he gave up. I told him my decision was final. If he ever tried to bring Brenda to an event she wasn't invited to, they would both be asked to leave. We're not officially cutting ties, but David and I will make a concerted effort to spend less time with Brenda moving forward. That probably means reducing contact with Mark as well. But the more I think about it, the more I realize that might actually improve our relationship with him. Brenda's antics aside, Lily genuinely enjoyed her birthday, and that's what truly matters. This whole experience with Brenda, it taught me so much about the importance of boundaries, even with family. And then, as if the universe wanted to test my newfound resolve, another situation arose, one that showed me just how deeply this need for self-protection extended. My cousin, Sarah, and we used to be inseparable growing up in Portland. Our families saw each other almost every weekend. We went to the same school for a while, and she was truly my closest friend. We told each other everything. But over the past year or so, things just started feeling different. It was hard to put my finger on it, just a vibe. See, I finished college earlier this year and started a full-time office job. Nothing glamorous, but I worked really hard to get there, so it was a big personal milestone. Sarah, on the other hand, is still figuring things out. And I genuinely mean it when I say I have zero judgment about that. Life isn't a race. But somewhere along the way, she started making these comments. Little things at first, which I brushed off as her usual sarcasm. She's always been like that. Things like, must be nice to already have your life together whenever I mentioned work, or some of us don't have it easy like you if I talked about weekend plans. She even started calling me corporate girl, which sounds harmless, but the way she said it always had this sharp edge, this subtle snideness that I couldn't explain without sounding overly sensitive. It became a pattern. If I mentioned being tired after a long week, she'd say, try being unemployed and stressed. Must be rough having a paycheck, though. If I talked about saving for a trip, she'd respond, of course you can afford it, with that little laugh. Any mention of work, even casual, was met with a dig. At first, I just laughed it off. I didn't want to be the person who couldn't take a joke. I told myself she didn't mean anything by it. But then it started happening in front of other people, family dinners, group hangouts, even once in front of strangers. And something about that made it worse. I found myself getting quieter in groups, dreading the next comment, not wanting to have to laugh it off in front of everyone. I started dreading hanging out with her, which was heartbreaking because I love her. A few weeks ago, we met for coffee, just the two of us. Within 20 minutes, she made a comment about how I'd changed since starting work, and was too busy for real people now. Maybe I was just tired, or maybe it was the culmination of everything, but that one just hit differently. So, I said something. Calmly. I told her the jokes had been piling up and were starting to feel genuinely hurtful, and I'd really appreciate it if she could ease up. She did not take it well. She got defensive, immediately saying I was being too sensitive, acting better than her, and making a big deal out of nothing. The conversation died awkwardly, feeling completely unresolved. After that, I just stopped reaching out. I still replied to her texts, but I didn't initiate plans anymore. Apparently, that didn't go unnoticed. Aunt Carol, Sarah's mom, called Diane, my mom, saying Sarah was upset that I'd gone cold on her and didn't understand why I was distant. I mean, I get that it probably felt that way to her, but she never acknowledged what I'd said at coffee. There's now this strange divide in the family. Some think I should just brush it off, keep the peace, that she was just joking. Others understand where I'm coming from. I truly didn't want this to become massive family drama, because I do love Sarah and miss our old friendship. But I couldn't go back to feeling uncomfortable every time we hung out. Then came the wild card. The day after I vented online about Sarah, she called me. Furious. Immediately yelling, saying I'd portrayed her wrong on Reddit, and now everyone was blaming her. She claimed people with Reddit were shaming her and making her look terrible. I was so confused, because my post barely got any traction. It was measured, a few comments agreeing with me, some suggesting talking it out. Nothing like she was describing. But she kept going, listing specific things I'd supposedly said in the post. Except I hadn't said half of it. She was talking about details that weren't in my post at all. Different scenarios, things I never mentioned, stuff that didn't even happen. That's when it clicked. She wasn't talking about my post. She was either talking about a completely different post she found, or I don't even know. I tried to tell her, but she wouldn't listen. She just hung up. Then she apparently went crying to Aunt Carol, claiming I'd publicly humiliated her online. Aunt Carol called Diane, who was confused because she'd actually read my post and knew it was tame. Another cousin, Alex, got involved, trying to mediate, and went looking for the post Sarah was describing. He couldn't find anything matching her claims. Then, there was this whole family group chat drama that I wasn't even in, but heard about later. People were trying to figure out what was going on. And then, this is the part that genuinely made me laugh, Sarah apparently let it slip in front of another aunt that she just did it to get a reaction out of me. The whole viral Reddit post thing. Either she made it up entirely, or found some random post that vaguely sounded similar and decided to pretend it was about her, to make me feel guilty, start drama, get attention? I genuinely have no idea. The group chat apparently went silent after that. Diane texted me later, saying, "So, your cousin is something else." And I just had to laugh, because what else can you do? The funniest part? My actual post was fine. Barely any traction, just sitting there minding its own business, while Sarah created an entire fictional drama around it. I honestly don't know what to do with this information. Part of me feels incredibly vindicated, because this is exactly the kind of behavior I was talking about in my original post. But another part of me just feels profoundly sad, because this is so much more unhinged than I ever expected. I haven't talked to her since. And honestly, I don't know if I even want to anymore. It's been a lot. Dealing with Brenda, dealing with Sarah. 2 different family members, 2 different dramas, but both circling back to the same core issue of boundaries and respect. It really makes you think about how we navigate these complicated family relationships, doesn't it? What would you have done differently in either of these situations?